Hi, I'm Justin.
Also, I hate the way my voice sounds, so if you can do whatever Photoshop does to voices, make me sound awesome.
And this is my lovely friend,
The beauty in the eyes of the beholder, and it's just about getting into the seat of being the beholder.
Hayley.
I don't think you have to be particularly perceptive. I just think you have to look up.
This podcast is mostly just her telling me stories.
If you expose yourself to the possibility that this might be really awkward, there can be something just really cool on the other side of it.
She thinks that her life and way of looking at things are
Oh, I was kind of waiting on you. I thought you were getting your stuff ready. You're waiting on me?
pretty normal.
You got to edit out all the misinformation about the Amish.
Maybe you can relate.
I would like a chance to re-sing the Amish Paradise.
If you want lighthearted stories
All right, you want to talk about goats?
and stream of consciousness,
I just woke up and needed some friends, and so I bought them.
then you're going to like the Sunny Side Up podcast.
Sunny side up, sunny side up, sunny side up, sunny side up.
So, if you're at all like me, you may feel that you're living in a world that can be a bit overwhelming and confusing at times. I'm also a huge fan of podcasts, documentaries, docudramas, stories, and of just information in general. Between all of that and the social media and news, sometimes our brains can feel like they're on overload. Hayley and I hope that this podcast can be something of an antidote to all of that. Like little jello shots of joy and distraction. None of it is too serious or really too informative. Mostly it's just two friends who have conversational chemistry talking about whatever enters the minds of relatively ADHD people. We hope you enjoy.
And this is why you shouldn't lick your shopping cart handles, because it's not so much that you handle the illness. You probably can. You've got a great immune response. The best. Like, I like to be all Trump about your immune response. But it's probably a great immune response. But the impacts that you can't control and how they're going to rear their heads later is the thing that we can't dismiss, and why I'm willing to continue to use hand sanitizer. Yeah. Also, I just like the masks. I like kind of being hidden, but that's also the me not wanting to go into a restaurant where you love going into a restaurant.
No, I
different strokes for different
strokes for folks. Maybe you're part Asian. I've noticed that Asian folks genuinely, like in Asia, you'll see pictures way before the coronavirus thing, really like masks, and there's a whole culture around it. It's part of their thing, and I think maybe it is a little bit of they're more private, they're more.
Partly they're so private, but also their living conditions are so much more congested. They're familiar with this,
and
fair. There is much more of a community. We're so self-centric, and they are so community-centric because they live that way. So my uncle moved from Alabama to China, to Beijing, and now he's in Ho Chi Minh City. So he's seen it from different... He knows that, and he comes here, and people don't want to wear their masks, and they don't really care about social distancing. And then he goes there, and they're so much more conscientious and polite. From the Bible Belt, where you should be, let me care about your space and your... to a culture that doesn't have a lot of Jesus, but they extreme measures to care for each other. It's such a different sense of community.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to do a study on how. Okay, so you're right, very the stereotypical Asian sort of idea of I'm one of many, and you see it in. Even in Japan, at least in the generations before, where if they worked for a company, their identity was so wound and intertwined with that company, they would never leave that company. They would do anything. They would die for that company, literally. And if they got fired from the company, sometimes it would be pretty extreme. Sometimes they'd actually consider suicide. It was awful. Their whole life was ruined. I know, it's really, really intense. And then, like you said, with China and some other places, it's all about. They don't think of themselves as individuals as much as they think of themselves as part of a group. Where then, of course, you have the U.S. where we're completely on the other side. We're actually, fascinatingly, if you do a study of every single country in the world and you look for the most individualistic, we're not the most individualistic country in the world by a little. It's if you look at a chart and you do dots and clusters on least to most, there's a bunch of countries all clustered around least individualistic, and then there's a few dots working their way towards most individualistic, and then there's a huge gap, and then there's
United
us.
States.
All by ourselves.
Okay.
Nobody touches us.
And that's what this week we're looking at the gun violence charts, and it's the same way.
Yes.
It's like a few things here and there with these other countries, and then the United States.
It's not
far and away in a category by itself.
Totally.
And it's interesting. I've never lived in another country besides the United States.
Yeah.
But I don't disagree with that whatsoever. Just through casual conversation with friends that live in other countries.
Yeah.
The United States is so emphatic about individualism and our individual rights, and it shapes our politics all the way down to our Constitution, right? Or at least our Bill of Rights. And it is so interesting to see how that dovetails or doesn't dovetail with our Bible Belt theology.
Yeah.
Where we talk about the importance of community in each other, but that doesn't go very well with an individualistic viewpoint, worldview.
Well, and of course, the ancient Near East, which is where most of the time and geographical area of books of the Bible would have been written, was being written by a society that would have been much more
community-based.
Yeah.
And I think that's why so much of it gets, I won't even say mistranslated, but poorly adapted to.
Right.
The American culture is just so different, and the value system is so different, and you don't realize why it doesn't fit so well until you step back. But it's
it is. It's very fascinating. I was going to say that it'd be interesting to do a comparison between, pick whatever sort of maybe the model Asian country is for.
What is the model Asian country? Is there one?
Yeah.
Let's have a contest.
That's right.
Let's judge
and
them
the
now.
Winner is so the model Asian country in terms of least individualistic, most communal thinking, and then contrast that or compare that with is it Norway or one of those, I think they're called Scandinavian countries, that is incredibly community focused. We would declare them very socialist, right? In America, we despise their socialism. Anyways, very socialist driven, very much care about your neighbor, because they're these very small countries. They're still, in essence, just a collection of tribes. And compare how they do it, probably with a little bit more individualism, I would guess. I don't know, but still very, very, very focused on their neighbor. Anyways, that's if you read about Norway or some of those places of having the highest, living
rates of satisfaction and life satisfaction,
or living, whatever. That's why it's
Which I wonder. Eastern countries with their community mindedness versus Western countries, and the more Western you get, the more individualistic you get. So with those Scandinavian countries being probably the most community oriented of the Western cultures. Yeah. So it's like the best of both worlds. Why don't we live in a Scandinavian country? Because they do consistently rank them, at least among Western nations, as having the highest level of satisfaction and happiness.
They rank highest against everybody. I mean,
they live in a winter.
I know.
Barren. There's no reason for them to be particularly happy about life. They're probably getting less vitamin D from the sun than the rest of us put together. Yeah. So there's not really any reason for it.
I will say this,
let's go there.
I am clearly on board with, I have my pet things that I want to reform in the U.S. and I can see, of course, for me, the justice system needs reforming along with, our educational system, our medical system.
Attention to adrenal glands. Gotcha.
Right. You are living, or your daughter is living the nightmare right now. Yes. So there are so many things to fix and make better. I will say, though, it is next to impossible to compare the United States with any other country, because I don't know if I'm going to be able, because I've never really articulated this, but it's we are not comparable to any other. And I don't mean that in we're the goddamn best in the whole world. My God, yeah, I'm not even saying that. I think we are the best in certain areas, but in
the
other
value
areas,
system is distinct.
Yeah, it's like we're different. And it's a little bit apples and oranges type of a thing of you can look at what other countries do and in areas that they quote unquote do better than us, but you cannot say, well, why don't we do that? We're just a different animal. And I will say this, I like the idea, like I think about this in terms of like different church denominations or in countries of the world, different mindsets. You kind of need all the different factions, not just to make it interesting, but actually to make it work. So in a weird way, if you think of the U.S. as like an organ in a body, I don't know which organ it is, but it's one of those organs where...
Is it the adrenal gland?
Is it the adrenal gland? No. Right, yeah. It could be, but whatever we are, we're that type of organ where we can't be compared to other organs. And if you take us out of the world sort of body metaphor, you are going to have real problems. You have to have a highly individualistic entity that does, because look at, we still do, as far as I remember, last time I checked, we do 80% of all R&D on every front.
Okay.
Medical, like we invent, technology at a rate. The next 3 most advanced countries in the world don't even touch us.
Sure.
Combined.
Okay.
Yeah. So, anyways, there is something, the upside to being highly individualistic is to the greater global whatever
community,
is important.
Yeah.
Community. Yeah. Anyways, that's a thought.
No, it is a thought, and I don't know is there a happy medium to be found. And that's why the United States is a social experiment.
Yeah. We are 100%.
Yeah.
And we're the oldest democracy in the world.
Yes, the longest lasting to this point. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
but
we're the oldest.
The others collapsed terribly long ago, like Rome. But
they weren't were they a democracy?
Democracy
that's fair.
Historically
yeah.
does not have the greatest longevity.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay.
It's volatile, but it is interesting to find out if individualism is a sustainable political like how it plays out. We're seeing it's so volatile right now because I think we're finding out that it doesn't really, it's not. Most political philosophers have said, as far as stability goes, I think monarchy is probably the most sustainable.
Think of our
socialism is probably one of the better systems if you have the right population for it. It has to be a small population with a homogenous culture, and
which is what Norway is, by the way. That's one of their advantages that we. I don't think you can't emulate because we're the most diverse country in the the world.
Yep.
So we have unusual problems,
and all the way down to like weather needs to be pretty similar across. Like everybody have similar resources and access to the same things for it to work well, which is why for our tiny little Latin American countries, it probably was a better system. Why were we so hell-bent on eradicating it from this hemisphere? Because it probably was a much more viable... Yeah.
Hello, lovely friends. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And it would mean the world if you would tell other people about this podcast and maybe even spam your social media accounts with just how much you're enjoying it. If you are, of course. Also, commenting and rating us on whatever platform you're downloading or streaming from is incredibly helpful to a little startup podcast like this one. On the other hand, if you are dissatisfied with your listening experience, please leave all of that hate on someone else's podcast. Just maybe to confuse them a little bit, right? But most of all, we hope you keep looking up and looking for the sunny side of life.